Is there no better rush than a safe scare? You jump and scream just to be able to laugh right after. Bowls of peeled grapes paraded around as eyeballs. The smell of corn syrup masked as blood in a dimly lit corridor you know someone's waiting around the corner to jump at you from. There's some level of purity within fear. This is the history of haunt houses, not haunted houses. The simple concept of a room of horror can be linked all the way back to 1802 with Madame Tussauds Chamber of Horrors. If you're unfamiliar with Madame Tussaud, she was a French artist notorious for her wax sculptures who, after narrowly escaping a guillotine herself, was employed to make death masks of French royals, in particular Marie Antoinette and King Louis, who she herself was very good acquaintances with. These would start the creation of her so-called Chamber of Horrors, which later would start adding things of notorious UK serial killers and murderabilia included. This being what I would argue is the first very similar taste of paying to go get scared, and of course this is still up to this day in London with a lot more additions like the Craig twins and a very shadowy so-called Jack the Ripper. Then in 1915, with rising use of industrial power, we would see the Orton and Spooner Ghost House, a steam-powered carnival attraction simulating a haunted house that was part of an Edwardian fair, including fake blood and howls of angry spirits. This would be the very first large-scale attraction created just in the means of scaring and terrifying you as a paying customer. Now, when I personally think of a haunted house, I think non-commercial, I think suburban, I think a dad in a mask putting up tarps. And like most things in America, this would actually have its origins within the Great Depression. Now, in 1933, this Halloween in particular would have kids pulling things only Philly pulls when the Eagles win. Sawing off phone poles, flipping cars. These kids quite literally had genuinely nothing better to do, and this was a reason to be mischievous. This Halloween was so chaotic, it started being referred to as the Black Halloween, similar to the Black Tuesday of the stock market crash that same year. This actually was so intense, so horrible, they were going to ban celebrating the holiday completely outright. But luckily they conceded to the idea of having something to preoccupy these kids with to keep them out of trouble. So almost out of pure necessity, the modern American haunt house was born. It became such a common occurrence to host them on Halloween in cities and neighborhoods that there were essentially instructional materials on how to put them on. Although now they seem extremely primitive in means, this was absolutely super effective, and arguably I think these are still pretty effective to this day. In particular, a pamphlet from 1937 stated, "Hang old fur strips of raw liver on walls where one feels his way to dark steps. Weird moans and howls come from dark corners. Damp sponges and hairnets hung from the ceiling touch his face. Doorways are barricaded so the guests must crawl through a dark tunnel." Sounds like Friday night, am I right, ladies? I am so lonely. By the late 1950s, California was a hotspot for haunt houses, many being one hosted by children's hospitals, giving back to the community, and it would spread throughout the rest of the country. Like the Children's Museum Haunted House in Indianapolis has been open since 1964 as Indiana's first ever haunt house and is still currently running and makes it the longest running haunt house in the entire nation. And of course, by the 1960s, haunt houses became a staple of the holiday, like hay rides or apple bobbing. Going to a haunt house was almost a necessity for the holiday. And now, surprise, surprise, someone would come along to monetize this very joyous occasion, and even less of a surprise, it would be Walt Disney himself. One of the most notorious haunt houses ever made to the public would be that of the opening of Walt Disney's Haunted Mansion in 1969. Having guests enter doom buggies and driving through a seance room, at a ghost ballroom, and eventually a graveyard. Still being one of the most popular attractions at Disney, at one point getting a single day record at 82,516 guests riding. And, you know, I used to live in Florida for a very long time. I'm no stranger to Disney, and I love the Haunted Mansion. This ride is immaculate. I hope they never get rid of it and update it. I love how hokey and kooky it is with the effects they were able to do. Beyond the set dressing of the mansion, to have a resemblance to the notoriously truly haunted Winchester home, the true genius was its use of pioneering effects. It used a complex set of illusions known as Pepper's ghosts, which used refracted light to project and shape ghostly images. Foregoing the use of the typical animatronics in view, it gave them a much more real feel. And I think it is far more than fair to mark this as a pivotal point in horror attractions as a absolute complete whole. This was absolutely revolutionary and changed the game forever. And of course, it still stayed local, along with these children's hospitals and people in their neighborhoods. Charities found this as a really great way to fundraise by using the model of a haunt house. A group in particular, referred to as the JCs, became known for their haunt houses. In the late 60s and 70s, they encouraged their members to create haunt houses in abandoned houses and fields and the means of raising funds. And many of these are still open to this day, and people go to them year after year. Even though it is not technically a haunt house, and we're going to get back to them in a moment when we get to the big old commercial section, but Knott's Berry Farm started doing Halloween activities all the way in 1973, technically making them the first theme park to celebrate Halloween commercially with their goers. What do you call people that go to a theme park? Attendees? Attendees. Yes? Let me know. Once we reached the 80s, we were undeniably in a very prime time for horror as a whole, and this reflected into haunt houses, of course. It would not be uncommon for you to go into a haunt house and see someone dressed as Freddy, Jason, if they were crafty enough, hell, maybe even Pinhead. We were taking a step away from ambiguous ghouls and ghosts and having more notable name-faced characters that, honestly, were a lot more scary to walk in and see because you saw how gruesome and brutal Freddy Krueger will pull you just right through a TV, and now he's standing in front of you in a dimly lit house in your neighborhood. I personally would note this also made a shift in horror houses, haunt houses, within going away from ghosts and typical scares into gore, blood, and violence, because that was also part of what was shifting within horror movies at the time. Now, of course, we've always had gore and violence in horror movies, but baby, the slashers were booming in the 80s. And with everyone focusing on monetization of things, this then started leading us to pro-haunt houses outside of the likes of Disney and Knott's Berry. These would open quickly, outshining the local and non-profit ones as they were made to make money, and you gotta spend money to make money, and spend it they did, with making much more elaborate houses and hiring scare actors. But like many unregulated things, a tragedy would strike. On the evening of May 11th in 1984, at the Haunted Castle in Six Flags, 8 teenagers would die in a fire that broke out. This is an excerpt from the newspaper on the incident the day after. According to park officials, the Haunted Castle is about 70 feet by 100 feet. Actors dressed as witches and monsters jump out to frighten visitors. Peter Berkey said the building had spires and turrets and arches and walls that looked like they were made of yellow stucco. The attraction consisted of 14 aluminum trailers with a facade that gave it the haunted house appearance. Last night, visitors to the scene said the aluminum was melted, seared, and blackened by the blaze. The smoke from the haunted castle billowed over an adjacent parking lot, enveloping people walking to and from their cars. Due to this event, politicians put a lot of laws and regulations on hosting things like haunt houses, and this ended up massively hurting charities and nonprofits because they just did not have the funds to rent and regulate these buildings like all of these massive corporations did. And I think this is one of the things that killed the whole concept of these fundraiser haunt houses and just nonprofit groups doing them, which, of course, it is absolutely necessary and needed for there to be regulations. Point A with what happened at the Haunted Castle, but this definitely did put a big side onto consumerism and major corporations kind of taking control of the concept of haunted house. Then in the late 80s and early 90s, theme parks would take a hold of this notable surge of Halloween love, trying to get more people to visit during the off-season. I would argue the most famous commercial haunt houses is Universal Halloween Horror Nights. The first one being called Fright Night and was a 3-night event held in 1991 under the theme of the Dungeon of Terror. It's one haunt house with many accompanying shows. But little is ever mentioned about Universal's first plight into doing any Halloween things that was actually titled Halloween Horror Nights. This took place in 1986, and you may wonder why this is not mentioned. Why is there a big break? Why did they do a rebranding name to Fright Nights? Why didn't they keep using this name because they end up using it again? That is because in 1986, this was marketed as a haunted tram ride, and during this, an employee working accidentally died. I can't find a lot of clarification on the death or the reporting of it. I'm assuming this was a vehicular accident, since it's a haunted tram, but yep, someone died on the first Halloween Horror Night. I'm not laughing at their death. It's the fact that Universal was like, okay, let's just not do Halloween stuff for a few years. We'll call it something else. And then that did so well. They were like, we can use the name again. No one cares. And unshockingly, the debut in 1991 of Fright Nights was an absolute major success, and yeah, no one really remembered that happened, so they rebranded it once again to their original title of Halloween Horror Nights. And the next year they would establish a very common, also arguably necessary trope of Universal's Halloween Horror Nights, which is having haunt houses based on films. The first one they ever did was based on Wes Craven's People Under the Stairs, which, go watch People Under the Stairs if you haven't. I love People Under the Stairs. People, I said it crazy, I don't care. People don't watch enough. It's so fun. I love it. Please go watch it. But this then started that entire trope within Universal, leading to movies, influence houses, which is also how House of a Thousand Corpses was born. Go watch that video. And as I mentioned earlier with Knott's Berry, they started all the way in the 78s, but now with Universal starting their whole haunt house stuff, Knott's Berry got in on scaring and being a lot more intense than it used to be, and having scare actors running around. And of course, you can't leave out the big greedy rat that is Disney. They have Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, which is obviously not so scary, and it's nowhere near any of the other parties. I will say, they don't have haunt houses, but they changed the rides. I went once. I didn't know they do that. You can drink in the Magic Kingdom, when I went, at least, which you can now. Space Mountain, they make it pitch black and play doom, fear-inducing classical music so loud. It's pitch black. I'm sure it's really cool if you were not as blasted as I was off of, like, Cinderella martinis, but, like, it was genuinely one of the scariest things I've done. They also make the teacups play, like, a really scary song. Like, it's not scary, but, like, if you're drunk, it gets kind of scary. And with theme parks taking a hold of Halloween and building it into their integration, it then, of course, spread globally. Now, like most things, Japan would take this and do it way better, more effectively, and way scarier than America when it comes to haunt houses, let alone commercial haunt houses. As Halloween doesn't occur in most other countries, like in Japan, going to haunt houses, or known out there as obakeyashiki, or in English, ghost house, are a summer staple with most young kids as they're out of school looking for things to do, and teenagers love a scare. And one of the most popular attractions in the entirety of Japan is called Fiji Q Highland. You there will find what is deemed the longest and scariest haunt house ever created, and arguably, I think they might have that. Going by the theme of an abandoned and depraved hospital ward being over half a mile long with constant scenes of pure gore and horror from dead babies and scare actors all along the way, it definitely makes itself hard to beat. And with over 4 million visitors to it, I think it may be worthy of the title of the scariest haunt attraction. And I believe there is a chance I'm going to Japan next year, so if I go, you best believe I am taking you to that with me. Of course, non-commercial haunt houses still exist, but I'd be remiss to not mention arguably the most notorious American haunt house for all the wrong reasons, Mckamey Manor. Now, if you're not familiar, I'm going to give you a little brief rundown, but there is literally an entire Hulu documentary about how cooked this whole situation is, so, you know, I'm just going to give you a little bit of it. Russ Mckamey sent out to make the most intense scare experience. An 8 to 10 hour tour that requires you to sign liability waivers. It would just cost you a bag of dog food, which in my personal opinion, it is not, my opinion, nothing real. I think this is done for a legal tactic way of, you know, well, it was a donation, because a lot of people do dodgy stuff by saying they're donations or making things donations. So the whole concept of like, oh, it's just a bag of dog food that I donate, I think this is nefarious and dodgy, regardless. Notoriously, there is the 10-hour Desolation Tour, which no one has ever been able to get through, to the point there is a $20,000 prize to anyone who can actually withstand it. But he does deduct $500 for every failed task or use of profanity while going through. Now, what is going on through this 10-hour tour, you might say? Well, it is about every means of mental, verbal, emotional torture you can legally put a human through. You're being attacked by Russ and essentially just anyone else Russ has on the property to help him at the time, until you have a true mental or physical breakdown, as you can see countless clips of people absolutely going through it, or there's even clips of Russ just saying, like, you can't do this anymore for your physicality, and it's like guys being like, no, I can still do it, which is a weird area, but this is set up for failure. You are literally being tortured. I'm not being dramatic. Like, this is like diet hostile, including being blindfolded and waterboarded, forced to drink and eat things of unknown origins, and just anything you can imagine. Being locked into fridges and freezers, having your hair cut. I'm pretty sure they like straight up just duct tape around your eyes to your head, which is not safe for the record. And just it's so annoying because like a lot of people see this as like, you know, this like stamina endurance test, and like he's getting off to this. Like, you know that, right? Apparently, a volunteer has verified that part of the 40-page waiver you're signing off, consenting to, includes having your teeth pulled, being tattooed, having fingernails ripped off, and anything and everything in between. Notably, in 2016, a participant named Laura claimed she used her safe word multiple times and was ignored for a while, and still proceeded to be tortured, and then later had to go to a hospital to be treated for extensive injuries she received due to the tour. And if you're like, how is this allowed to happen? Like, yeah, people agree, but like, how is this allowed to happen? It's the 40-page waiver I mentioned. But it's really weird. It's a lot of legal gray area, if I'm honest. And obviously, I'm not a lawyer. Might be shocking, I'm aware. But like, part of this waiver is signing away to do a bunch of things, and it is very unfortunate about how much you can harm people and not get in trouble. And that's just really real. And, you know, you sign this, legal, yada yada, and I don't want to make assumptions. Everything I say is in my personal opinion, and that is it, and these are all assumptions in my opinion. Okay? I have a feeling if you agree to do this, and you kind of try to go to do anything about it, they're just like, you're a sick freak that asked for it, so who really cares? Which I can understand within reason, but I also don't think people quite understand what it is like to be in positions of torture. Truly. That's all I'm gonna say about that. And what's funny is when I first made this video, because this is a post-incident redo, when I first made this video, I was like, it's a matter of time before Russ is arrested for something. I even said, I was like, I don't think he's gonna get in trouble for this haunted house. He's been doing it for long enough. He knows whatever he needs to do for this stuff. He is in jail. He's currently in jail, and it's not having to do with the haunted house. He tried to kill his girlfriend, that I believe is like 20 years younger than him. Also, allegedly tried to do a lot of other things. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty. But if you think a man that spends his entire life torturing people for his own enjoyment may have possibly tried to kill a woman, you know, you can make your own assumptions. I'm just saying, he's definitely arrested for these charges that have not been proven, but he's arrested. Okay. Now, I personally love to get scared. I am very hopeful that I get to go to a scare house this Halloween year, other than commercial ones. Once again, as always, I say support small horror, support small everything. Do haunted tours, haunted mazes, haunted hayrides. Just go support local people that want to scare the crap out of you, because they're going to appreciate your visit a lot more than Disney and Six Flags will. Not saying not go to those places, but again, always support small horror. Have you ever been to a non-commercial haunt house, a commercial haunt house, a pro haunt house, any haunt of house? Let me know down below. I think one of my earliest, most pivotal memories in my entire life is a haunt house scene situation from when I was a child. I'm a military brat. We were on base and they were doing some Halloween thing for kids. I'm not kidding you. I had to have been in kindergarten, maybe the first grade, and they had this like room that there was like a big room, and there was this tiny room that had a giant glass window, and they just had it covered in the plastic sheets, and were like spraying blood on it and having guys slam their hands on it. And that is one of the core earliest memories I have of being a living being. And I think that might explain a lot, but you know, it's a good memory to have. I truly do treasure that memory. Do you have any memories like that? Let me know. This was the history of haunted houses, not haunted houses, haunt houses. I feel like that will screw me in the algorithm, or it'll help me in the algorithm. Either way, angry comments get me engagement, baby, so hate me all you want down below. I want to say thanks to everyone who's subscribing lately and watching. Randomly tripled subscribers. Very cool. Very fun. Very happy for that. I will say that Snuff video is the video that just keeps on giving, because I think the original upload was like 170k, and we're kicking it now. Once again, thanks for liking, watching, commenting, and subscribing. Members see videos early if you want to be a member. The link's down below. It's on the channel. And thanks for following me on every social media site. It is under Darby Valentine's. I will have them all linked down below. once again, thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing. Make sure to hit the notification bell if you like this video. Screw it. Maybe you like my video about the deep dive into human cannibalism, because that video took so much work. So please go watch that. Once again, thanks for watching. Bye!